My name is Jack W. Wilson, Wilson.
Okay. Well, now, Jack, where were you when Pearl Harbor happened, and what did you think about
I
that?
was a senior in Newburgh High School, Newburgh, Indiana. And at the time that happened, I was working at a drugstore on that Sunday. And the word came over the news at that time, and I was real shocked about it. I was just a young boy, and I had no idea that anything like that could happen at that time. And I was just real surprised that it happened.
Did you think you were going to get caught up in this thing?
No, I didn't at the time. I know as time went on with it, different ones, when I went back into school Monday, I had a couple fellows in my class that they said, well, they were going to quit school and join the Army. And I thought about it, and then I thought again. I thought, no, I want to go and get my education. And in fact, my mother and dad got on me right away when I said something about it. Said, you go on to school and stay in school, which I did. And you want me to tell you a little more about this or not?
Yeah, I'm just going to take your hat here and I'm going to lift it up just to here,
Okay.
right about like that, if that's okay.
That's fine.
We're trying to keep the shadow off your
Okay.
eyes.
Okay.
Yeah, go on. Tell me how you did finally get involved.
When I graduated out of high school, they had a shipyard there in Evansville, Indiana. It's where they built LSTs, and they were just starting that. And I had to get a job, and we had a good friend in Newburgh. His name was Martin, and he was a retired lieutenant commander out of the Navy. And he was to be in charge of the naval inspection for these LSTs. Well, I contacted him right away, and I told him, I said, Mr. Martin, I said, I've just graduated from high school, and I need a job. Can you help me get a job at the shipyard? He said, yes, Jack. He said, you go on down and put in your application, and I'll take care of it. Immediately I did that, and just in 2 or 3 days, I got a call to come in to the shipyard. And they put me in the mold loft down there. That was where they made the pattern for all these LSTs. It was a huge hardwood floor. They had 2 engineers, the superintendent, and I. That's all was in there at that time. And I asked this one engineer, his name was Richard Brown, his name was Nick. And I said, Nick, what are we going to do up here in this thing? He said, well, son, we're going to build patterns for these LSTs. And I said, well, how big are they? He said, 327 foot long. And I don't recall offhand how wide. We had a set of double doors down at the end of this building, about 12 foot. And I looked at those doors, and I said, how in the heck are we going to get something like that out of here? And he laughed, and he said, you don't know much, do you? And I said, no, I don't guess I do. If we're going to build ships 327 foot long and get them through 12-foot doors, I don't know much. And he laughed, and he said, I'm adopting you. You belong to me. He kept me with him. He was, like I say, he was an engineer, and he and I shot the base line and the center line on this hardwood floor, and we made every move in these patterns, making these patterns for these LSTs. And the time we got the patterns all completed, they start putting the ship together out on the ways. And I was just a kid, 19 years old at that time, and the superintendent wouldn't pay me Lawson's pay. And he said, no, you're too young for that. And I was getting 85 cents an hour, and a Lawson was supposed to be $1.25 an hour. Well, this engineer that I was with was getting transferred out in the yards to start building the bow section of these ships. And he said, Jack, when I get out there, I will have you transferred, and you'll be my #1 layout man. I did that. And he called me out there immediately after that, and I went to work building the bow section as a #1 layout man at $1.25 an hour. And we were out in the open there in the winter, and it was really nasty on those skids in the wintertime. And long about February, middle of February, I guess it was, or something like that, I got my draft notice, and I told him, I said, Rip, I'm going to leave you in 2 weeks. He said, what do you mean leave me? He said, I told him, I said, my draft notice come and I'm going to service. He said, oh, no, you're not. He said, I'm going to get you to firm it. He said, you're needed here. He said, you're a layout man. That's an important job on this ship. And I want you here. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I said, all the fellows I grew up with and all are going to service, and I'm going too. But he got mad at me, but it didn't do any good. And we didn't speak for about 10 days. And finally, he started speaking to me, and he said, I can understand your feeling. And he said, I wish you would have stayed with me. But he said, what do you want to do is your business. Well, I went. And I went in, when I was inducted, it was so funny, I got to tell you a little part about this. The day I took my physical examination and everything, I went through this line up there, and they interviewed me, what I had done and everything, and I told them what I had did, what my job category had been. And they put me in a line over there for the Navy. And I said, I don't want in the Navy. And the fellow told me, he said, well, with what you have done, we figure you're more suited for the Navy than anything else. And I said, I do not want in the Navy. And I was arguing with this fellow, and the line next to it was Army. Well, there was an Army officer over there, and he heard the argument, and he said, son, what's the matter? And I said, they're trying to put me in the Navy, and I don't want in the Navy. He said, well, what do you want? I said, I want the Army. He said, step over here, you're in the Army. I stepped over in the Army line, and he said, now tell me, why didn't you want in the Navy? I said, well, I had helped build LSTs, and I said, I don't even know the damn things afloat or not. He laughed, he got a big kick out of that. Of course, I was joking, as far as that goes, you know, but anyhow, that was when I got in the Army. And when I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis. I was there for a few days, and from there I went to Camp Blanding, Florida. There was a...
Hold on just a minute, Jack. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the shipyard. Were there women working in the shipyard?
There was women working there. They had women welders, was mostly women welders. And it was so funny as a 19-year-old kid. I mean, I'm not bragging about my salary, but back at that time, the average pay scale there was around 85 to 90 cents an hour. A welder, a ship fitter, a carpenter, the top of their line net was making like $1.10, $1.15 an hour. And this job I had was $1.25 an hour. And it was one of the top of the line jobs. And that's why the superintendent said I was too young to be making a salary like that. So.
Well, how fast were you turning out these LSTs?
Oh, gosh, I'll tell you honest goodness truth, I couldn't tell you for sure. I was there from May till March, and that time we would outfit them and everything, put them all together, and then they would launch them, and there would be a naval crew come up, and they would go down Ohio to Mississippi and out New Orleans, and they were dispersed from there. And then where they went from there, I have no idea. But I'll tell you a little something else about LSTs. We're talking about it. When I went overseas on the Empress of Scotland, a British ship, and we went to Casablanca. And they put us on these 48 cars, and I traveled all across North Africa. When we stopped in Oran, North Africa, there was an LST in the port there. And this LST was kind of sideways, and I could see it. And you could see all the way through that thing, midship. It had been torpedoed, and you could drive a vehicle plumb through this thing. But the way they were built one bulkhead after another, and you had to blow them all to pieces to sink them. And they were real flat bottom, and boy, when you got in rough water, it was bounce to bounce to bounce. But you could run them right up on the beach, you know.
You know that we've interviewed some guys that were LST crews, and they called them large, slow targets.
They were.
Okay, well, tell me how you got to the division.
Well, anyhow, let's see, where was I? I went.
You'd gone through Harrison, you were going to Blanding.
I took my basic training at Camp Blanding, Florida, with a new outfit, and after that, I went to Camp Robinson, Arkansas, for advanced training, and for there, I went to Fort Meade, Maryland. And Fort Meade, Maryland to Camp Patrick Henry, Virginia, where we loaded on this British ship, the Empress of Scotland. And I didn't know till just recently that this ship we got on, the Empress of Scotland, had been a Japanese liner. and it was based. It was in port in Canada someplace at the time of Pearl Harbor. Well, the British took it over then, and they changed the name from Empress of Japan to the Empress of Scotland, and this was used for a troop ship. And I went over that. We went over it unescorted on this thing from there. But anyhow, after I went all the way across North Africa, the fighting was over in Sicily, and the invasion of Italy had been at Salerno. And I came in about a month after that, I guess. My division, 36th Division, was the one that made the initial landing in Salerno. They were the first American troops to fight on European soil. And they lost about half the people on these beaches. And the 36th Division was an old Texas National Guard outfit. And a lot of those boys in that division went into service when they were 15 and 16 years old. That was back during the Depression when no one had any money. And they said if you were big enough, you were old enough. And I think that was one reason they didn't get kicked back in the ocean there, because those boys had been brought up the hard way and they knew how to take care of themselves. But anyhow, I came in with them at Mount Lungo. That was a hard-fought battle there. Italy had capitulated and they had joined us at that time. Well, they had a few Italian forces in this thing at that time, and they wanted to capture Mount Lungo. And we let them try. We called them the Peacock Soldiers. They had helmets with feathers on them. And anyhow, the Germans slaughtered them on this thing. They didn't make any headway at all, and ended up our division did have to take it. Well, from Mount Lungo, we had several more small engagements. We went down on the Rapido River, and that was one of the worst things that the division was ever involved in, was the Rapido River. I was the number 2 gunner on a 30 caliber machine gun at that time. And this one evening, my platoon leader told me and the number 1 leader there that said there was one of our patrols was across the river, and they were pinned down by Germans over there in the edge of this town of St. Angelo. And they wanted us to start firing, and we had a gun zeroed in for the edge of St. Angelo. Said, start firing to see if you can shut those guns up so our patrol can get out. Well, the fellow was number 1 gunner on the machine gun, started firing, and he got about a half a box through there, and then 2 machine guns start shooting back at us. Well, he was a fellow that was quite a bit older than I, and he had been through the Battle of Salerno and all. He'd been through quite a bit already. And he got down to the bottom of Foxhole and wouldn't shoot anymore. It was a pretty bad spot where we were in. Well, anyhow, the lieutenant hollered at me and he said, Wilson, get on that machine gun and start shooting. And I did. And I fired about, off and on, I fired about 2 hours that night. And finally they came in on the phone and said, you can stop firing now, that the patrol, you have shut up those 2 machine guns, and our patrol was back across the river and safe. And the lieutenant told me, he said, Wilson, you're the number 1 gunner now. And I'm not going to mention names, for I don't want any hard feelings. The fellow was number 1 gunner, you're number 2 gunner. So we went on after that, and we made 2 attempts to cross that Rapido River down there. The first night we went down there, the engineers had put up a footbridge, and they had smoke screen out because the Germans had everything zeroed in down there, and minefields were all over the place. Well, we got down to the river's edge. Some of the fellows got across on footbridge, and the Germans knocked the footbridge out. I never got across the river because I was carrying a 51-pound machine gun tripod. And they said, get back up on the hill quick, we're expecting a counterattack. Well, we got back up on the hill, set up the gun, nothing happened. The next night, they said, well, you're going to try it again. This time they had some wooden barges that we were going to use. Well, we got down to the river's edge, and this time a mortar fire, the machine gun fire had killed the fellows on the barges, had blown up the barges, and we were under intense, we call them screaming mimes. They were Nebelwerfers, 5 or 6 barreled rockets. Anyhow, I was told again, get back up on that hill quick and set that machine gun up. There will be a counterattack. Well, with all this gun, artillery fire and everything we had, the tape marking the minefields had been blown away. And we had to go through that, and you never knew when you put your foot down when you was going to put it on. And it was so dark you could hardly see your hand in front of you. All at once, someone grabbed me by the leg and said, please help me. I looked down, and there was a fella that stepped on a mine. He had one leg that looked, I'm sure he lost a leg over it, and the other one was mangled bad. And his eyes were out, running down his face. And he was crying, said, please help me. And he was holding on to my leg tight. And I said, I can't, I've got to get back up on it. I got to get back up on that hill. Anyhow, I did. And we never had this counterattack. It never happened. But we had several fellows that got across that river that night, and the majority of them never got back again. Old Mark Clark was our commanding general. And we didn't know it at that time, but we were a diversionary force while they were making invasion of Anzio. We were drawing the Germans away from Anzio, and we were the sitting ducks for it. And we were really slaughtered on it. And no one had any use for Mark Clark at all, none whatsoever. And I'll tell you, if he'd have ever come down around that Rapido River, I don't think we'd been bothered by him anymore. But anyhow, after our second attempt to cross that river, and we couldn't, he said, well, you couldn't do it in the daytime, you're going to go in the day. At night, you're going to do it in the daytime. Well, we knew if we couldn't do it at night, we couldn't make it in the daytime. And we knew that was it for us. Our commanding general was General Walker, and he was a fine fellow, and he absolutely refused. He said, I will not send my men across that river anymore. And we didn't go across the river. Later, shortly after that, he was relieved of his command, and he was sent back to the United States, and he was commanding general of Fort Benning after that, in Georgia. Yes, no.
Yeah, it's in Georgia.
Yes, in Georgia. Anyhow, after that, we stayed. We left that position, and we were in this. We called it the Purple Heart Valley, and it was the Larry Valley. What was a proper name for it. And this was just before we went to Anzio, and you couldn't stick your head out of a foxhole in the daytime, or you'd lose it. And anything if you had to go to the toilet, you used your steel helmet, and then you threw it out of the hole when you could. At nighttime, when you slept in a foxhole, you slept with your bayonet on your rifle. German combat patrols were out every place. Our combat patrols were out. And we had people that was actually bayoneted in their foxholes at night. And if you lit a cigarette, you made sure that you had a raincoat or a blanket over your head, because any sign of fire like that was no good at all. But anyhow, we were in this Purple Heart Valley for about 4 or 5 days, and word come out that we were going up on Mount Cairo, right across from Monte Cassino, and this was to relieve the 34th Division, who had been up there. Well, I'm getting just a little ahead of myself. When they decided that we weren't going to make this third attempt to cross the Rapido River, we had a lot of fellows that was laying over there dead and wounded. And one of the fellows in our rifle company, his name was Carl Strom. He spoke fluent German, and he negotiated a peace with the Germans to pick up our dead and ones that was badly wounded laying over there. And it took a day to do that. And while we were up on that hill, we saw the body. All they did was pick them up and they threw them in the back of 2.5-ton trucks. And the bodies were stiff. It just looked like a bunch of fence posts thrown in there. It was really a disheartening thing to see it. But anyhow, they got them all picked up. And then we went on to this Purple Heart Valley, and we were there approximately 4 days. And they said we were to go up on Mount Cairo to relieve the 34th Division. Well, we had to wait till nightfall to leave, and we walked that night, and I actually went to sleep walking and stepped in a hole. But anyhow, we went to this little town at the foot of Mount Cairo. It was a town that was already devastated. It was the city of Cassino, and we stayed there. We stayed in that town for about 3 or 4 days, I guess, before we went up on the mountain to relieve the 34th Division. And a good friend of mine and I, we were dug in close to a cemetery. It had a wall, about a 12-foot wall all around it. We wanted to go in this cemetery and see what it looked like. Well, we did. We went in there. They had bodies buried in cases along this wall with glass front. You could see the old bodies laying in there, everything. And all at once somebody hollered, "Hey boys, don't take another step." We looked over there, and it was a tank destroyer outside that wall, one of ours, and the fellow happened to stand up on it and look in there, and he saw us. He said, "You're in a minefield in this cemetery." He said, "Go to looking." And we did. We could see tripwires here and there between flower pots and things. And boy, I'll tell you, we had a hard time coming out of that cemetery because we were scared we'd step on something. But we did make it out of there. And about the next day, we went up on this Mount Cairo. And as #1 gunner, I carried the tripod for this thing. The tripod weighed 51 pounds. The barrel and receiver weighed 33 pounds. Box of ammunition weighed 27 pounds. And all the ammunition carriers carried two 27. The assistant gunner, he carried the barrel receiver that weighed the 33, and the #1 carried the tripod that weighed 51. Anyhow, we were all day getting up on this mountaintop. And we got up there. My arms went to sleep carrying this gun, and I couldn't get the tripod off my shoulder. I had to take it off my shoulder. And we were told where to set the guns up and everything. Well, I found a shelf, rock shelf sticking out in a position where they wanted me to set my gun up. And I put my gun under there, and I told the fellow who was with me then, I had a different #2 gunner then, a fellow my age and all, and a good friend. I said, "I'll get up here and I'll throw rocks down to you, and you stack them around the gun." Well, I was up on this rock ledge throwing rocks down to him, and a mortar barrage came in. Well, one of the mortar shells hit close to me, and with the concussion and the footing I had, I lost my balance and I fell off of this thing. I hurt my back real bad. Well, I got back down in the hole, and the next morning I couldn't hardly move. And I told my lieutenant, I said, "I've got to get down here to the aid station and see if it can do something for me." And he said, "You go ahead." Well, I hobbled down that mountain, and I picked up a Tommy gun someplace along the way. I was carrying it. Got down that aid station, the first thing they tried to do was take the Tommy gun away from us. They didn't want no arms in the aid station. I wouldn't give it to them. So, "What are you doing here?" And I told them what happened to me and everything. They said, "Well, where are you bleeding?" I said, "I'm not bleeding. It just hurt my back." "Get back up on that mountain." And they said, "Wait a minute, we got a phone call just come in." I told them what outfit I was in. Said, "You've got some men up there that's wounded, and we need somebody to take litter bearers up there." So I took the litter bearers back up there. They all had Red Cross armbands on. We got back up there where my outfit was at, and I was helping them pick up the wounded. They had Red Cross armbands on, and I didn't. I had this Tommy gun on my shoulder. Well, that caused a mortar barrage again. This time I got hit. I got hit in the leg above the knee, halfway between the knee and thigh, and what we called a $1 million wound. Well, I could walk, but that was about all. And some of the fellows there said, well, they had brought supplies up shortly before that, and there was mules. They brought them up with mules, and there's some mules over here around the corner yet. They went and got them for the wounded to ride down on and was able to. Well, they put me on one of these mules, and this mule stiffened up, and I slid right down its neck. Put me on there again, stiffened up, down I went again. Well, they said, well, we'll put you on again. I said, no, you ain't putting me on there anymore, because we were up above the clouds, and I could just picture riding down there and that mule doing that and being on the off side. I said, I can't hobble down this mountain. There was another fellow there that had been wounded in the buttocks, and he said, I can't ride a mule anyhow. So he and I hobbled down the mountain together. we got down there at the bottom this time at aid station. This time I was bleeding. And they treated me there, and then they put me in an ambulance and took me to another aid station where they treated me again. I ended up in the 74th Station Hospital on the Volturno River. This was in February. February the 13th was when I was wounded up there. Anyhow, got in the hospital. I knew a couple of boys there that was wounded the day after I was, and they said, "Jack, you should have stayed a day longer. The Air Force bombed the Abbey. They destroyed it the day after you left there." Well, anyhow, I stayed in this 74th Station Hospital, and this wound in my leg wouldn't heal up. Like I said, this was in February, first part of March and all. And this doctor that was treating me, he said, "We may have to do a skin graft on you." And I thought, dang, skin graft, something like that. Well, next day he brought another doctor in, and he looked at it, and the first thing he did, I had a ridge around this leg. It was real funny looking. And he had the nurse say, "Get a tongue depressor." She handed him a tongue depressor, and he said, "You hold on, this is going to hurt a little." He took that tongue depressor, and he dug in around my wound. He brought out sulfamelinide. Every place I had been, I'd put sulfamelinide on those wounds. Every place I'd been, they'd put sulfamelinide. He said, "You're poisoned with sulfamelinide." He said, "You never healed up." And it set up in there like concrete around the thing. Well, immediately after that, a few days, the thing started healing up. Well, I think within a week's time after I was wounded, maybe 10 days, my outfit was pulled off that mountain. They were sent back down to Salerno for replacements, new equipment, and more training and everything. Well, actually, I didn't lose but about 2 to 3 weeks combat with them, being in the hospital. Because right after I got back down there, we went up to Anzio, and we were the ones that we made the initial breakthrough at Anzio. Well, I'll tell you something before that. I was in a replacement depot waiting to be reassigned to my outfit. And at that time, we couldn't get replacements. Everything was going to England for the invasion over there. And the guys told me, he said, "You probably never get to go back to your own outfit because they need replacements real bad here for other outfits." Well, they had a fellow that was recruiting for the 1st and 3rd Ranger Battalion, and I was a 19-year-old kid, not too smart, I guess. I thought, well, if I can't get back to my outfit, I want to get in this Ranger outfit. I went over there, was the first sergeant was recruiting for it. Went in his tent, sat down there and talked to him. He said, "Jack, where are you from?" I said, "Newburgh, Indiana." He said, "Well, I'll be damned." He said, "I'm from Evansville." That was 10 miles west of us, We talked a while, and he said, "How come you want to join the Ranger Battalion?" And I told him what I had been told, and he said, "My advice to you," he said, "I'm recruiting for his 1st and 3rd, and he was one of them. He said, "Stay where you are." He said, "You'll probably go back to your own outfit." Well, I did, and within just a few days, I went back to my outfit. Well, when we broke through at Anzio, our division, they infiltrated my regiment through the German lines at night. We infiltrated through there, and we were told, "No ammunition in your guns, bayonet on your rifle, and a hand grenade if you have to use it." And we did get through the German lines on that. Well, we went through this one place, Cisterna, up there. That was where the 1st and 3rd Ranger Battalion tried to break through the lines. And the Germans had them ambushed. They had tanks up on this ridge, and the 1st and 3rd was wiped out. All of them was either killed or captured. I don't think it was over half a dozen of them survived that thing. And I was always so sorry that I hadn't took this first sergeant's name and address in Evansville so I could check on him when I got back home. But anyhow, we did. We infiltrated through, and we broke through.
Hold on just a minute. We have to change tapes.
We broke through it at Valletta, and we were pushing real good. And we had several sharp combat episodes between there and Rome, and we were among some of the first troops in Rome. And old Mark Clark, he wanted to ride a Jeep in there the first thing, but he didn't get to go. There was some more of us got there ahead of him, and the British was wanting to be the first in there. And that was the main thing. Mark Clark wanted to get in there ahead of the British. There was a strong conflict between Mark Clark and Alexander at that time. It really was. But anyhow, we went on, we pushed on above Rome, and we had the Germans on the run pretty well. We had broke that line, that main line they had there, and they were wanting to go up there and establish another line, and we were having a hard time making contact with them. Well, the outfit I was in D Company, heavy weapons machine gun, we had two machine gun platoons, and each platoon had 4 squads, each squad with a machine gun. And we were assigned to rifle companies. And at this particular time, I was a squad sergeant. And my section was with Company A. And the lieutenant in Company A told me, he said, Wilson, he said, we've got to make contact with these Germans. And he said, I want you to get in a Jeep with a light machine gun and another one of your boys, another machine gun, drive down this highway till you make contact. Boy, that's not a very good assignment. Well, anyhow, we took an air-cooled machine gun, put the windshield down, and stuck the bipod under it, and I sat next to the driver on that. One of my other boys was in the back with a machine gun mounted on a pedestal. We drove down this highway. We got down the highway, I would say approximately 4, maybe 6 miles, and all at once up ahead I saw a flash and heard boom. There was a water can right by my leg on this Jeep, and that water can disappeared. Well, when I saw the flash, I knew what it was, and I started in with my machine gun right at that flash. And the driver was turning the Jeep around the middle of the road. When he got it turned around, my man in the back on the other machine gun, he started with his machine gun. Well, we got on down the road and around the curve, and we were not shot at again. But we were very fortunate. I don't know whether there was a tank or a self-propelled gun up there, but they were expecting the tank to come down that road. And they had an armor-piercing shell on there. And if it had been an HE shell, it would have killed us, you know. But it hit that water can right by my leg, and the water can was gone. Well, I got back there and made contact with A Company again, and this lieutenant asked me, he said, Wilson, he said, did you make contact? I said, come here, I want to show you your Jeep. I said, see where that water can was? Yeah, where'd that go? I said, it's laying up there where the contact's at. I said, we were shot at by either an anti-tank gun or a tank, and we were fortunate it was armor piercing. And I said, that's where your contact's at. So they fanned out, went on up the line and attacked position, and they made contact with them. We fought hard. We had a hard-fought battle up there all night long, off and on. And a little before daylight, I noticed no one was firing except us with our machine gun and my weapons carrier man there. And I told one of the boys, I said, something's funny here. I said, crawl back here and find out what's going on. Well, one of my boys I had told us to, he crawled back and he come back, he said, Jack, there's nobody else back there. We're the only ones here. I said, well, I'll be damned. So we loaded up and we started back, and we didn't get back too far. We came into a mortar position. Mortar position had been abandoned. It had been from our company, D Companies. They left the mortars there and they left a Jeep. Well, one of the boys in my squad at that time, he said, I was a taxi driver in Brooklyn or Bronx. And he said, I drive this Jeep. Well, we loaded up our gun and stuff, and I think there was 6 of us. We all piled on that Jeep and we started back to the rear. We got back, I guess, about 1.5 miles, 2 miles, and we met our company coming back. My company commander said, Wilson, what are you doing up there? And I told him, I said, we were with A Company, and they were told to withdraw, and nobody told us. We stayed up there. We didn't know any better. He said, well, I will check into that for you. Well, anyhow, some of the boys that came into real close contact with the enemy that night thought we were fighting Japanese. And the way it ended up, there was a whole battalion of Mongolians up there that the Germans had captured on the Russian front and made them fight for them. They'd do that with the Polish or any of them and say, you fight for us or we'll kill your family. And this was a whole battalion of Mongolians, what it was. And after we overcome that, then we pushed on. We went up as far as a place called Civitavecchia. And I was given about a 5-day R&R trip on that. Well, my outfit then were relieved, and they went back down around Salerno and Paestum for more amphibious training and new equipment. Well, I spent 5 days in Rome. Me and several other fellows on our R&R, and we reported back down there after 5 days. Well, we were told then we were getting amphibious training. You're going to make an invasion. We didn't know where. Rumors were it'd be over on the other coast and invading Greece. We thought maybe we were going to Greece at that time. We had no idea. Well, anyhow, I was made section sergeant at that time, and that was 2 squads I was in charge of. But anyhow, my lieutenant asked me, he said, have you had any training in high explosives and things? I said, well, not really. It's all been on machine guns and sidearms, personal weapons like that. He said, I want you to take some training in heavy explosives. And I did. Went in there, we used these quarter pound charges, knew how to cut a tree in two, and beehive charges to dig a hole with, and Bangalore torpedoes to blow barbed wire and all. Well, when we loaded up on, getting ready to load up on the ship, he told me, he said, you're the Bangalore torpedo man for this invasion, which I was. And anyhow, we got on an LST, and after we were out to sea a little from there, they told us where we were going. We were going on invasion in southern France. And my regiment was the extreme right flank for this whole invasion, saying, down close to Cannes. And we loaded up off of LST, we were on LST, and into these Higgins boats, which were made of plywood. And we were about 3/4 of the way into where we were going, this one cove we were going into. And we were sitting in rows, and I was sitting my back to a peninsula there. We passed that, and all at once, the fellow sitting across from me, about that far above the head, I saw a row of bullet holes. And I knew I had the same thing above my head. Well, there was a machine gun emplacement along this peninsula. And he was working our landing barge over pretty good. Well, it wasn't not long after that, and they hit something in there close to the beach. Well, the fellow that was operating the Higgins boat, he stopped the motor. He dropped the ramp, and the sailor that dropped the ramp for us, reverse machine gun fire, killed him. I presume he was killed because he was hit several times by it, and I had to step over him to get in the water. And I had the Bangalore in my right hand, my M1 rifle in the left, and I was in water halfway between my belt and my armpits. And I didn't go very far, and these machine gun bullets was hitting water all around me, and I thought, well, I'll never get in the bank. About that time, I felt my hand jerk a little, and I could feel warm running down my arm. And that was the hand that had that Bangalore torpedo in. I looked out of the corner of my eye, and this finger right here had just a small crease from one of the machine gun bullets, and I thought, God damn, if he'd hit that Bangalore, it would got me and the boys behind me. Well, about that time, I heard the engine on a smaller airplane. I looked up out of the corner of my eye, and it was one of these Kingfisher pontoon planes that they launched off of destroyers and things like that. Well, they saw what was happening there, and the fellow in the back, he stood up with twin 50s, and he took out that machine gun that was shooting dust in there. Well, I was able to get in on bank. First thing, there was barbed wire. I blew the barbed wire. There was no mines in there. And I got on up there, and the rest of our boys came out. We had a few of our fellows that was killed on that, and several was wounded. I have no idea offhand how many there was at that time. But we got on up on the road there. There was a big cove in there, and a railroad trestle went across. Well, we got up on the main highway, and we were waiting for an assignment because some of the rifle companies already was pushing down the highway toward Cannes. And we were waiting to see who we were assigned to. And I was with A Company again, and I was talking to a fella from A Company, and we were going down the road real slow. And all at once somebody hollered at him, and he turned around, and when he did, he threw his hands up like that and let out a yelp. He was shot between the shoulder blades, it looked like with a shotgun up close. He had a place up big around. He's shot by a sniper with a wooden bullet. And one of the other boys said, I think I know where that sniper's at up there. And the lieutenant said, if you wanted to, go get him. I said, I'll go with you. And one of the other boys said, I'll go with you. The three of us scattered out, and we started running zigzag up on this mountainside. We got about halfway up there, and this German sniper come out with his hands up, "Comrade." He surrendered. Well, we went on up there, and we shook him down, and he had wooden bullets on him. All three of us shot him. We took some wooden bullets back down there and showed to the lieutenant. Said, "We got your sniper, and here's one." He said, "If I'd have been with you, I'd have shot him too." Well, anyhow, we got back on the highway, and we were going on in down to Cairns. And we were told, said, "Don't touch anything." There's a bunch of real beautiful homes all along the seafront there. They had fences and archways and everything. And they said, "Everything around here is booby-trapped." Well, I kind of looked back at that time, and one of my boys started to reach up and ring a bell over this archway. And I hollered, I said, "Hey, don't touch that dang thing." And he got his hand back, and one of the other boys looked up there, and he said, "It's a good thing you could see. It was a charge up there. If he'd rang that bell, that booby trap went off, and that steel would have went all around." Well, anyhow, we didn't get down the highway too much farther than him. And we relieved a bunch of our Rangers. They weren't ours. They were the Free French, what they were. They were Free French Rangers. And they had come in down there on those cliffs, and some of them had been trapped by the Germans. Well, we got them out of that mess. Then we went on down a little farther, and we were being shelled by big coastal guns in there. We were on a railroad track that went inland, and these coastal guns were using smoke shells on us. Smoke shells and, can't think right anymore what to call this stuff. Anyhow, it all, phosphorus, white phosphorus shells. And if that white phosphorus got on you, it would burn plumb through your arm and all, and you had to take mud or something to put it out. Well, we were fortunate, there was a tunnel, just short ways from where we were, and we all ran up and got in that tunnel. We stayed in that tunnel for about an hour, I guess, till that coastal gun quit firing. We came out and then went on. Well, for weeks and weeks after that, you see somebody, you could tell who it was spent an hour in that tunnel, because everything over there, those Indians were coal-fired. And we were all black as we could be for sitting in that thing. But anyhow, about that time, they said that we were going to be put in a task force called Task Force Butler. That was just my regiment. And we were loaded up on trucks, and we went in. Patton had broke back on some Germans down there. I think it was in close to that hedgerow thing. And the German 19th Army was trying to get on up in our direction to set up another line of resistance. And we were being sent up there to try and stop this German 19th Army. Well, we got up there where we were supposed to go. There was the Rhone River, and there was one of the main highways that ran parallel with the river, and then this ridge that we were set up on. Well, my lieutenant and I, we dug our machine guns in around this thing and waited for us to go back up on this hill, and all at once there was a nice highway off to our right. And all at once, a German half-track started coming down that highway. Well, there were some other groups up there waiting to be reassigned too, and some of them were anti-tank, and there was an anti-tank gun there, 57 millimeter anti-tank gun. But where the anti-tank crew was, I don't know. And someone said, "Wish we could get that anti-tank gun going." Well, one of the boys in my section, his name was Frank Gallwitzer, and Frank had took his training in anti-tank. And he said, I was a gunner on an anti-tank gun. Well, he jumped up and he ran over and got on this anti-tank gun. His first shot missed it. The second shot, he hit this half-track and knocked it out. There was two fellows in there and the driver. Well, they weren't hurt. They jumped out and they ran back down the road a little. There was a big concrete culvert there, and I saw them go into this culvert. Well, I was sitting on one of our machine guns like that, and I was about a 45-degree angle off from that. And I hollered to the lieutenant, I said, "I've got a good view of them in here." He said, "Let them have it." And I ran about a fourth of a belt in through that culvert at this 45-degree angle, and I knew anything in there would be devastated. And the boys ran over and said, "You got them all." Got all three of them, and there was six French civilians in there too that we didn't know was in there. Killed them all. Which felt bad about it. There was nothing we could do. It wasn't our fault. We didn't know we were in there. It wasn't my fault. Well, anyhow, that afternoon, that next morning, I always took my turn standing guard. I didn't have to as a non-commissioned officer, but I did. I felt better standing guard. And I'd usually take the last 2 hours, the hour before dark and the hour after dark. And that morning, just light enough to see, I could make this soldier creeping and crawling toward my gun. And I could see, I knew it was a German. And he had Schmeiser, that's their submachine gun. He's headed right toward our machine gun. Well, anyhow, I woke the boy up in the hole with me, and I told him what we had there. And I said, you get on the machine gun here. I said, when he gets within about 40 yards from here, I said, I'm going to see if I can get him with a rifle, because I didn't want to open up that machine gun, because I didn't know what was going to have there. And I said, if I miss him, then you get him with a machine gun. Well, I didn't miss him. I hit him. And there wasn't any more come up there. I don't know. Evidently, he was going to come and try to take out our machine gun. He knew what we had done up there with it, killing those fellows in that half-track and everything. But anyhow, we had no more problem with it. Well, the lieutenant told me, he said, Jack, you and I are going up on this ridge and find out where to put 2 of your machine guns up there. Well, he and I went up on the ridge, and I had a long-handled shovel that I had picked up down there at the farmhouse, and I thought, well, it would make it a lot easier to dig guns in with, you know. We got up on this ridge, and we were going down through there, and all at once there was a burst of machine gun fire, and we both hit the ground real quick. Then there was another burst of machine gun fire. This time I felt that shovel handle quiver in my hand. I looked out of the corner of my eye, and part of the handle was shattered on this shovel. The next burst of fire, I felt the pack on my back quiver. And Lieutenant said, Jack, are you hit? I said, you know, I don't feel any pain, but I said, I guess I am, because I can feel warm running down my back. He said, we got to get out of here. So we both jumped up right quick, and we ran just the other side of that ridge. We didn't have far to go, and why they never shot at us, I don't know. He said, let me see where you hit. I had a combat pack on. He said, take that dang pack off. Took it off. He said, what color's your blood? And I said, now, what color do you think my blood is? And he got to laughing. We opened that pack up. I had a can of beer. I had a bottle of Vaseline hair tonic. I had a clean pair of socks, clean underwear. That's all I had in that pack. Well, just before we made the invasion, they gave us 6 beers, and I'd saved one for a special occasion. Well, I never got to get it. That machine gun fire had riddled all of this stuff. Well, anyhow, we were fortunate neither one of us was hit. Well, we went back down the ridge a little farther, and we found where we wanted to set these 2 machine guns up. And I went down and got boys on my section and dig in and everything. But this time, the Germans were starting to come down this highway. The Air Force was working them over real good. Our mortars was working them over, and the artillery was. Well, we started in with our machine guns, and we were really tearing them up. And all at once, I noticed this German half-track that was similar to the one we had, with 4 20-millimeter anti-aircraft guns on. He pulled out a line there right in front of us. It was lined up, and I told the boys, I said, get off these guns and run real quick to the backside of this ridge. I said, that guy's going to try to work us over. Well, we did. We ran to the backside of that ridge, and we no sooner got over there, and this officer came up there and said, who's in charge of those machine guns over there? Well, it ended up, it was my regimental commander, Colonel Steele. I said, I am, sir. He said, why aren't you firing? And I told him, I said, we had been inflicting a lot of casualties on him, but all at once this half-track pulled out with this shield in front of it. And I said, I knew we couldn't harm them, but I said, those 4 20-millimeters would wipe this out pretty quick. A bunch of damn yellow bellies. He went over and got on one of our machine guns. He didn't get a third of a belt through, and the ACAC cut loose on him, and he was hit all over. He wasn't killed, but we waited just a little while. We went over there. The half-track had pulled out, and we got him out of the hole. And he was wounded in several different places. I don't think he ever came back to the regiment. He wasn't killed, but he was fortunate. But anyhow, I told my lieutenant about this. I told my company commander, and they said, Jack, you did the right thing. I said, my opinion was, I said, well, I'm in charge of these men. I said, to me, my main thing is to try to protect my men if I can. I said, it's better to run today to be able to fight tomorrow when you know you don't have a chance. I said, you're right. Well, anyhow, after that conflict there, we went on in this town of Montlamar. And then we moved on over, and we were close to the Swiss border at that time. We took the town of Besançon, Grenoble, something less Bains, which meant the city of Bath. They had natural warm springs in there. And we got to stay there a couple days, and we had our first baths we'd had in ages and ages in there. These natural warm springs, and then we went on. We went till we came to, this was the Rhone River before. We went down there to Moselle River crossing. And there was some old man that lived in a little town there on Moselle. He knew where there was a ford, where it was easy to go across. And at daylight, we moved down to that area, and he took us to where this was at, and one of the boys went across with a rope, and they put a rope up there. And water came up to about here on me on that thing. It was swift and cold. This was the last of September, the 1st of October, I guess it was, and it was really running swift. Well, at that particular time, we were carrying air-cooled lighter machine guns. We got across the river, there was an old barn over there. And the way they made these barns over there, they would be stone on two sides, one end would be wood, and a lot of times they would build their house onto that end. Well, there wasn't no house there, just that wooden end. Well, company commander told us also, get in this barn till we get assignment what we're going to do. We all went in this barn. We were cold, we were wet, and all at once a machine gun up on that hill started shooting in the wooden end of that barn. Them bullets ricocheting back and forth inside this thing. Well, I was wet, I was cold, was in a foul mood, and I said to the lieutenant, I said, I'd like to take one of these light machine guns and slip out this door down here and see if I can pinpoint that guy and put a stop to this. And he said, you go ahead. And one of my boys said, I'll go with you, Jack. And he grabbed up a box of ammunition, and I grabbed the light machine gun. We slipped out that end door. There was a lot of heavy brush up there. Nothing real big, but stuff about 7 or 8 foot tall. And we worked our way part of the way up this hill. And we stopped, and we heard another burst of machine gun fire. I knew approximately where it was at. Well, we moved up a little farther, and we heard it again. Then we moved up a little more, and the third time this guy fired, I knew just about where he was at. I could pinpoint it. And I set my gun down there, and I ran about a half a box of ammunition right into where I figured that gun was at. We went up over. I told this boy, I said, you stand there with your carbine and cover me. I'll take this light machine gun and see. Well, I had took the machine gun out. I had killed a gunner who was on it, and he'd had somebody with him, and this guy had been wounded, and he was able to get away. I could see his blood trail going on up the hill. Well, I took my machine gun, and I disabled his, went back down. I told the lieutenant, I had this guy's cap, duck bill cap, and I've still got it, in fact. I showed the lieutenant, I said, there's the guy that was shooting at us there. Put a stop to that. And he said, well, I'll give you a nice citation for that. I never did get it. Anyhow, we went on into that, and it wasn't too long after that my platoon sergeant, name was Philip DeRiggy. He was a little fella. He was a coal miner from West Virginia, and he wasn't very big, but he was all man and a really good platoon sergeant. He took a real bad hit up there, and I didn't know at the time, but found out later he died from it. Well, they made me platoon sergeant at that time. Well, we moved on a little farther, and there was a town up there we were to take. Befontaine. Befontaine was the name of it, and Bruyères. Well, we didn't know at that time that the Japanese-American boys had been attached to us, this 104.42. Well, we were to take the town of Bruyères that next day. And then all at once that night they came back and said, no, the Japanese-American boys are going to take it. You go up on this hill and you take over their positions. You won't have to dig foxholes tonight. Well, that sounded good to us. We went up there, but hell, we had to dig them anyhow because those guys were little. We had to enlarge them. Well, anyhow, they had a hard-fought battle down there on that thing. And and they took Bruyères. Then they took another town we were to take, Befontaine. And about that time, we had a town by the name of St. Aim we were to take. Well, we took that, and we were expecting a strong counterattack. The lieutenant told me to take a section of machine guns down on the edge of the town and set them up real quick to stop this counterattack. Well, as I went down this street, there was a stone wall there, and I went around the corner. As I went around the corner, there was a tank up on that hill someplace I didn't know about. Well, he shot directly at me, and that shell hit this stone wall above my head, and I was probably 15 foot from it, I guess, and this hit. Well, it knocked me out cold. Fellas thought I was dead, and they went on down and set the guns up and everything. Well, the counterattack never did happen, but I was knocked out for about 10 minutes. When I came to, I had blood coming out my ears, out my nose. I had a horrible ringing in my head. Rifle I had in my right hand, the stock was shattered on it. I had a pair of binoculars over my spine, my back. There was a piece of shrapnel that big in my binoculars, which would have been in my spine if it hadn't been for binoculars. And lieutenant said, "Well, Jack, how you doing?" I said, I'm sore, I hurt all over, and I'm having a hard time hearing and all. I said, I guess I need to go on sick call. And he said, if you're not hurting too bad, he said, wait a day or two, if you can. And he said, we're needed real bad. And we had very few non-coms at that time. And I had just been made platoon sergeant. I said, okay, I will. Well, we went off on this attack there in the Vosges Mountains. We broke through the German lines at that time. It was the same German 19th Army that we had to stop down there on the Task Force Butler. Well, we broke through. My outfit broke through, and we were about 5, 6, maybe 7 miles behind the German lines. And we realized that there was no one behind us. The Germans had closed the line up, and our people couldn't break through again. Well, we formed a circle up there, dug in and everything, and we were pretty low on ammunition, food, and medical supplies at that time because we'd had a hard fight getting up there breaking through this thing. Well, our 142nd Regiment tried to break through to us, and they couldn't. And I found out later on that one of the boys from my hometown that I grew up with, he had been a platoon sergeant, and he was killed trying to break through for us up there. His name was Harold Barnett. Anyhow, Marty Higgins was in charge of us. There was elements of A, B, and C Company, and this one section of machine guns that I had and my lieutenant, Gordon Nelson, had. And that was it. Well, they had this one radio up there is all they had, and the batteries were getting low on it. Well, Marty Higgins got on that radio and told division the position we were in and everything. Said we were real low on all of this stuff. Well, first thing they did, they dropped supplies into us by parachute. They all hung up in these trees. This was a heavily wooded area, tall pine trees. They all hung up in the trees, we couldn't get to them. Got on the radio and told them. Then they tried shooting D-bars. I don't know whether you know what a D-bar is, a concentrated chocolate bar. They put them in 105 millimeter smoke shells.
Let us change tapes.
Okay. They tried that. You want me to go on?
Yeah.
You ready? Okay. They tried dropping supplies with it, with parachute, and then they tried these 105 things. We took a few casualties, but D-bars. And Marty Higgins got on the radio and said, stop this, because those D-bars, man, they were hard as rocks. The next thing they did, they dive bombed us with P-47s, the belly tank on them. They had supplies of that, and they all landed outside of our perimeter. And we had to go out and fight the Germans to get our supplies out of that. Well, anyhow, after about, ahead of myself again. Higgins sent out 2 patrols. I think 50 to 60 men each to try to find a place for us to get through the line. Very few of them ever came back. I mean, they couldn't find a way out. And after that second patrol, none of them came back, they decided to send a 3rd patrol. And my platoon leader sent word down to me. He said, Jack, I want 3 of your men to go on this patrol this time. Well, I didn't have over about 5 or 6 men down there to start with. So I said, I will stay on machine gun, and the fellow that I was on machine gun with, Bert McQueen, he was born and raised down the Daniel Boone National Forest. He was an old hillbilly from Kentucky. I said, I'll send him. And the other fellow's name was Tillman Warren, and he was born and raised at Pikeville, Kentucky, the other end of that Daniel Boone National Forest. Then I sent another fellow with him. Can't remember his name, but he was from Michigan. And I thought, well, those 2 boys from Kentucky was born and raised in this kind of country. And if anybody can make their way in through here, they can. The way it ended up, my 3 were the only ones that came back from the patrol, plus they brought a prisoner back with them. And shortly after that, the Japanese Americans broke through. And the fellow that made the first contact with it, one of our boys out of C Company, Buck Glover was his name. And I knew Buck, and Buck almost shot him. When he said, the reason I didn't shoot him, he said, I thought, well, that couldn't be a German. He's too little. Because the Germans at times, they would, when they wanted to infiltrate our lines, they would take our uniforms, and do this. And Buck didn't shoot. He said, I was really glad I didn't. He said, about that time, he said, this guy threw his hand up. He said, hey, does anybody need a cigarette? And the fellow's name was Mutt Sakamoto. He was a BAR man. And they ended up, Mutt and I was together, discharged together at Camp Carson, Colorado. But anyhow, this broke through for us. And those boys, in 3 engagements there, they lost over 800 men. And around 600 of them were lost, cutting us out of this battalion, rescued 270 some of us out of that thing. Anyhow, the next day, I was still feeling terrible from this concussion I had, and had several other things about me. I went on a sick call. And the night before that, they had a movie for us. We were pulled back, and the name of that movie was Back Home in Indiana. And I thought, no, isn't that strange? Back home in Indiana, and I'm from Indiana, but I never thought any more about it. Well, I went on a sick call. I had pneumonia. I had a bad case of trench foot. I had this bad concussion. I had an old leg wound was bothering me again that I had up at Monte Cassino, and they started evacuating me back and back and back and back. And before long, I was in the 3rd General Hospital in the city of Aix, France, out of Marseille. And from there, I was loaded up on a ship and sent back to Halloran General Hospital in New York. From there, I was sent to Camp Carson, Colorado. I got 28 days sick leave home, and then went back to Camp Carson, which was a convalescent hospital. This was in January and February. And in my barracks, there was some of the Japanese American boys, and one of them was this Mutt Sakamoto that was the first one made contact with us. And he and I got to be good friends. And I have seen him and been in contact with him since then. Well, anyhow, it was just a convalescent hospital there, and we were waiting to be discharged and being treated for different things. And our company commander came in there one day, and he said, anyone wants a staff sergeant or above has to get a platoon together, whip them up in shape to parade for generals from Larry Field down in Denver. And this one staff sergeant and I were real good friends, and I looked at him. I said, I'm not going to parade for no SBA anymore. Are you? And he said, no. So we went back on sick call, and we told our doctor, who was a major down there, what this captain had told us. He laughed, and he said, you don't have to parade for nobody anymore. I said, would you please put that in writing? He said, I will. And he did. Took it back and gave it to the company commander, and he was real hot about this. He said, well, we were going to town every night. We had a pass, we'd go in there, we'd go in town, we'd doing a lot of celebration. We'd get in trouble in there and get in fights, and MPs would bring us back. About the only soldiers around there at that time was guys like us, all convalescents, and we could get by with about anything. But anyhow, they'd bring us back to camp, and the company commander said, well, he said, you're going to do something. So he made this buddy of mine, Earl Rothermick was his name, supply sergeants. Well, that was a big mistake, because every day people were being discharged, and they'd go through the line, turn stuff in, and say, I wish I could take this on with me. Let's take that. It was maybe part of a uniform, all junk, you know. Take it home. There was no record on it. Gave it to him. Well, what do we owe you? You don't owe us a thing. Well, we'd like to get you something. Well, bring us a bottle of whiskey. Back at the time, Three Feathers, Guggenheimer, and Southern Comfort, and Old Rum. That was the main stuff. Well, it ended up, we had a Foot Locker. It was almost full of that stuff. And Earl and I were drinking every day, and we'd pretty well lit up every day. Company commander would come in there, and he'd fuss and cuss. And this one day, he brought a chow pup dog in there for us to look after. It wasn't about that tall. Well, we weren't too happy about that. And one day, Earl and I was sitting there. We were both about half shot. And we said, wonder if we could get that pup drunk. I picked up the pup and held it, got a tablespoon. Earl got a bottle of that old rum out. After about the third tablespoon of that rum, you didn't have to get a spoon anymore. We pour it in a pan, and that dog would drink that rum. A couple of days later, the company commander came in there. I was drunk. Earl was drunk. The dog was staggering across the floor. Company commander said, "Ah, damn," he said, "bad enough you guys are alcoholics." He said, "You made an alcoholic out of my dog." And I got my discharge within a week. So,
I just wondered how you felt about those guys, the Japanese Americans that cut their.
I think a lot of them, I'll tell you that. I always thought, I said, to me, they were the finest soldiers in the American Army. They took more casualties. They received more commendations than any outfit that fought for the United States Army, outfit their size. They did. And the thing that got me with them was the 442 itself was made up. Most of those boys that come out of these concentration camps. They went in there and they said, well, if you want to fight for the United States, you can come out of this concentration camp. And I'd say probably 90-95% of them did. Well, they had something to prove, and they proved that they were good Americans. And if they would have told me that, if I'd been in a concentration camp, I'd have told them probably where they could have put it. They were fine people, and they still are. And I've been to 2 of their reunions. I'm an honorary member of their outfit. This is their, and they made me. I went to their 50th reunion in Hawaii, and they had about 2,000 people there that final evening. And when it was about over, they said, "Well, Jack Wilson, come up to the podium." I thought, I wonder what they want me up here for. Well, I went up there. They hung a beautiful medallion about that big around my neck. I said, "What is this for?" They said, "This is commemorating our comradeship with you, and we consider you an honorary member of our outfit." And I thanked them, made a little talk for them, and I said, at that time my division was starting a museum in Austin, Texas. And I said, I will take this back, and I said, it'll be put in a museum in Austin, which I did. And I've been back to one more of the reunions over there since then. But one thing I can't understand, why none of them are here for this. Some of the boys down here on this thing, the 442, asked them, and all I know, they said there's about 2 from Hawaii here. I don't know any Central Illinois isn't here. And I've made personal contact with him several times. He's a fine person. But why, I don't know. There's always conflict between some of these boys. So I don't know what it is. And none of my business to pry into it.
Us either.
Yeah. But I'll say one thing. As far as I'm concerned, they're one of the finest bunches that ever fought in World War II. And if it hadn't been for them, I don't think I would be here today, because we heard later, we had inflicted so many casualties on the Germans going up there and everything. And they knew they had us trapped, and they were going to try to starve us out. And we heard that they had been given orders not to take any prisoners with us, which was quite common in some of those things, you know. We had times we didn't take them either. So I don't think, I've told those boys in World War II, I said, one of you, I don't think I'd be here today, and I don't. I'm real serious about it. No, I think the world and all those boys, I really do. And there's several of them belong to they're honorary members of my division, 36th Division. And I go to from 3 to 4 reunions a year, and there's always several of them in there, and they're just like part of us now. Fine people, I'll tell you that.
As it should be.
They are. Yeah, I was over yesterday. Marty Higgins, who's one of them, Marty was the one that was, you know, he was our commander up there on that thing. He wasn't really a battalion commander, he was a company commander. And up there in that thing, the battalion commander wasn't there, and he was the oldest, and the other officers decided to put him in charge. He was the battalion commander on that thing. Marty and I are real good friends. I saw him again this morning. He's over on the stage this morning. Then they got another one or two this evening. And tonight I have to join my outfit. My American Legion post back home sent my wife and I here to represent them. And we really weren't coming here to this until today to be with them. And I was contacted by this Terry, can't think of his last name, Japanese American boys. They wanted me to be here with them on some of this stuff. And I've been with them as much as I could this first couple days. But now, after this, I have to get in with my American Legion bunch. I'm a 59-year-old member of my post, and I'm the oldest member they have in that. Not in age, but belonging to the post. I joined the post before the war was over in Japan. Well, you all want to get out